I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter podcast. One of the reasons is, as for a successful recruiting firm, a small number of clients sometimes bring the most amount of the work. My guest calls them the apex clients. He sometimes calls them the 20 percenters, because sometimes 20% of your clients will bring 80% of your revenue. But here's the question though. How do you find these big whales? How do you find them? So I am so excited. I have a returning guest, Mike Ames, with me to talk about how to find these awesome Apex clients. So welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Absolute pleasure to be here and really excited about covering this subject too.
So real quick for the listeners, we're not going to do a super deep dive into Mike's background. If you want to find out more about that, check out episode 80, where we did a deep dive on how Mike ended up in recruiting, his entire story, how he exited his firm, and now like everything else that he's doing. So ready to jump past that.
Yeah. You don't want to hear that all over again, do you really, I suppose?
Yeah.
Supposed to say, like most people, I didn't plan to be in recruitment. I just ended up there, I think, and made the most of my opportunity. I think I could say that fairly safely. And 36 years later, I'm still in recruitment.
And like we definitely go back to the episode because Mike talks about like some of the pivotal moments where, building the firm, unfortunately a tragedy happened and Mike was left with the decision of what am I going to do with this career? What am I going to do with this business? And like it was, you can go listen to the story. It was a very, very hard time for a very long time, but they grew their company like massively, exited, and he's been in the space ever since.
Yeah, we did it again then. We started another business a year later, and the first business was sold to an American company based in Jacksonville in Florida, although you would know that obviously being American. But the second business was slightly smaller but made the same amount of profit, and we sold that to a UK listed company called Harvey Nash. So 2017 was my last recruitment company.
Awesome. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so first of all, what is a 20 percenter? What is an Apex client?
Okay, so in most reasonably sized recruitment firms, i.e. not tiny ones, you'll find that a small number of your clients deliver a large amount of your revenue. So it's the old Pareto law of 20-80. So 20% of your clients give you 80% of your revenue. So the idea is that you win more of the 20%ers because it has a disproportionate effect on your growth. Whereas if you're winning small businesses, small clients, you're going to grow, of course, but not to the same rate. And I think the difference in my first business, I'm going to try and translate these into dollars because you won't know what pounds are. And this was 30 years ago. But it took us 5 years to go from naught to about $7.5 million. And then it took another 5 years to go from $7.5 million to about $50 million. Right. And the difference was we targeted high value clients. And when we got them, we kept them. Massive difference. Can't even tell you what difference it was. It was enormous.
Well, okay. So the first 5 years, were you guys just chasing like any client, any business possible?
Yeah, we did. There was no structure to it, really. We did what most recruiters do. We did what's called tactical business development. And tactical BD is chasing adverts, cold calling, trying to spec in. I don't know whether that translates into America, trying to take a candidate that you've got and sell them in to a client.
MPC.
Yeah.
Most
okay.
placeable candidate.
Yes. Specking those candidates in. Maybe taking candidate intelligence, like, hey, I've just been for an interview, this, that, the other place, and so on. Okay, follow that and try and see if you can get the vacancy. So what we were after was vacancies. And what we switched over to doing was chasing clients. It doesn't sound like there's a big difference. You might argue they're the same, but they are so not the same. And I think in a second, to try and illustrate that point, what we have to do is differentiate between tactical business development and really specify that, because then we can go on to talk about strategic business development, which is where the money is.
So like you went from like just like, chasing openings to like actually chasing clients? Like how is that like conversational wise? I get it when, for the listeners, I get it if like, hey, you have this opening or I have this candidate, I want to NPC it, let's chat, versus
Oh,
I just want to be a partner.
okay. Well, it's not quite like that really, but okay, let's look at tactical BD first, because I think
Okay.
everybody listening to this podcast will understand that. So tactical BD used to be called back in the day transactional BD. For some reason, it's changed its name now, but transactional BD is about getting a transaction. So a number of things have to happen at once if you're chasing a transaction. You have to be able to get to the person who's got a transaction. They have to be looking for candidates right now. They have to have openings or vacancies, as we would say. They have to be not satisfied with their existing suppliers, and they have to be prepared to trust a complete stranger, someone they've never met perhaps or spoken to before, with that vacancy, right? That's a lot of ifs to happen. And so because it's not likely, you have to make a lot of calls and emails. We always say you have to kiss a lot of prospect frogs to get a client prince, right? So it's just the nature of the beast. And a lot of people fill their day with vacancy chasing, with transactional BD. So the key approach to that, if I can summarize it, and then I'm going to move over to chasing Apex clients, the narrative there, if I can simplify it, is give us a vacancy. I mean, that's it. I want to make some money right now. Give us a vacancy. I want to make some money right now. So it could be a specking candidate in, or it could be, but the bottom line is you want to make some money right now. The downside with that is, as I said, it's very unlikely statistically that you'll get all of those boxes ticked. So you'll have to make a lot of activity around it. It's also very unlikely that you'll get really good quality vacancies, because the chances are other agencies have had them for a while, which is why they're giving them to you now, really. So, and it could be they're very difficult. And the chance of getting that as an exclusive or retained piece of work is pretty slim, really, as well. So, and also one last thing, which is a really important point, I think. When the market is flatter, as it is now, when it's not as buoyant, good quality clients don't tend to go outside of their established supplier base. Why would they? There's no need, because they've got the suppliers have got less vacancies to work on, so they put more effort in. There are more candidates swilling around, and so they want to bury the opportunities that they get. So you're probably not going to win high value clients. If do you really want a client that gives everybody that rings them a vacancy? Do you really want those kind of clients? Because I don't,
Not.
right? So basically, that it's all stacked against you, which is one of the reasons in the UK, at least, the average number of employees in a recruitment company is 7, right? Because they chase vacancies. Now, let's compare that with strategic BD, or what it used to be called back in the day, relationship selling. I prefer relationship selling, but nonetheless, let's go with the modern phrase. So strategic BD. The narrative there isn't, can I make some money out of you right now? The narrative is, we've developed a flavor of recruitment over the years, listening to our clients and refining what we do over and over again. Some people like it and some people don't. What I want to do is explain to you what it is. If you don't like it, we'll just go our separate ways. It's absolutely fine. And I wish you well. If you do like it, then we'll just wait. And we tested this next little phrase, right? So whether it takes 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, it doesn't matter. We'll keep adding value. We'll keep in touch until the opportunity comes our way. And then when it comes our way, you'll know exactly what you're going to get, because I've outlined the solution. It's a completely different narrative. Because if you ring in as a tactical business developer, if you get the timing wrong, that's pretty much the end of the call. You got any vacancies? No. Oh, okay then. Well, I'll call back in 3 months then. Whereas I often used to say, when people say, I haven't got any vacancies, to say, well, I don't really want any, to be honest, right now. In fact, I usually find they get in the way. What we want to do is fully understand whether our flavour of recruitment matches your tastes. That's what I want to do. And you've got to be able to see, and you see in a minute, I'm going to go through these 4 steps, which make up strategic BD. I'm going to explain what they are for people. But you'll see that it's very important that we are able to articulate our flavour of recruitment in a way that makes it distinctive, in a way that makes it stand out. And it's not that difficult to do that, quite frankly. So now you can see, so on the one hand, you've got somebody who's doing a lot of calls and a lot of emails, or one of those frightful auto emails, sending AI generated emails. I absolutely loathe and detest. They're whacking them out all over the place. They're not pulling in the really high value clients. It's taking a lot of time. And in many cases, they're just getting a spot deal. So they just get one deal. And then they have to go and repeat all that effort to get another deal. What we want is high value clients that generate a stream of vacancies. That's what we want, because that makes us uber efficient. And so I'm going to talk about all of those things with you in a minute, because I think it's important I get a level of detail. But you see the kind of difference between the two, a different narrative, a different approach between those two.
And yeah, no, I definitely see that. And, I'd say I almost like want to jump in and just start asking questions, but let's
Sure thing.
let
Yeah,
you.
go for it. Yeah.
So, what's a basic for the listeners? What's it like? Is your outreach different from the transactional versus the strategic?
Yeah. Well, there can be a crossover. I'm going to go through that in a minute, because
Yeah,
the
figured you were.
strategic BD is 4 steps, and the second one is outreach. So, and I have to explain how that works, because these days it's very different to what it's been in the past. The very latest thinking around this is very different to what people have been trained and done in the past. So it's very important that I explain that so that people understand what it is.
Okay, jump in.
Okay, all right then. So we're chasing high value clients. And one more thing I'll say before I just launch into this, why it's important to do this. If you want to make a lot of profit, and it's all about profit, it's not about revenues, it's not about number of staff, it's not about number of offices or any of those things, it's profit. That's what counts, right? If you want to make a lot of profit, the way you do that is you figure out ways to lift your revenues without lifting your costs. That's it. That's the big thing. And there are 10 different ways that you can do that. But one of them is get higher value or better quality clients. And there's a definition for a high value client as well, which I'm happy to talk about a bit later if we have time, because the clearer your definition of the 20%er, the more likely you are to be able to win them. Do you know, I don't know whether you're familiar with, this sounds a bit lateral, right? But I've got to go with it, right? So in Europe and in Australia and Asia, I don't think in America in the same way, but we have cave paintings which are 30 or 40,000 years old, and they're usually of animals. They're the kind of animals that our ancestors would hunt. And nobody really knows why they did that. But one stream of thinking is, because a lot of these animals are animals that you would eat, is that people were representing their prey in a way that they could get closer to them and be more successful when they were hunting. It's kind of like that, except you don't need to get paint on your fingers. The closer that you can identify and properly visualize those clients, the more likely you are to win them. And that's true. So you can cave paint if you like, if that's your bag, but you don't need to. But you have to have a clear definition of what it is. Shall I go through the 4 steps with you now?
So, like, pause on that. Like, talking about a clear definition. Are you talking about like a visualization of this, or are you talking about sitting down and actually building out that client avatar that you really want?
The latter. It's
Okay.
definitely looking at it. Well, I can tell you. So all high value clients have certain things in common. So they have a steady stream of vacancies, openings that you can fill. So it's no good winning a client that has a vacancy every blue moon, or they're so difficult that they're really, really hard to fill. You need ones that they come out and you can fill them. The second thing is they pay you what you think you're worth. That's kind of important, really. The third one is you can deal directly with the hiring manager. You don't have to go through a TA group or a HR group or anything. The fourth thing is the hiring manager has to treat you with respect. Makes it easy for you to get vacancies and actually manage them. You know that thing where some managers send, you send the CVs, you send the resumes, and they sit on for 3 or 4 weeks. So by the time they get back to you, half the candidates have gone. So you've got to start again. I don't mean that. I mean someone that works with you and understands that
Okay.
the more they do, the more you can do. Right. So that's a generic hiring manager, because ICPs, ideal client profiles, are actually at hiring manager level, weirdly, because you can have 2 companies, you can have one company with 2 different hiring managers in. One is really good because they do all of these things. The other one isn't. So you kind of have to measure at that level. Now, at a corporate level, at a company level, you're thinking of things like size, ownership. Is it a private company? Is it listed company? Is it owned by a PE company? Whatever. You're looking at their location perhaps, their sector, those kind of things, which you can get from your existing 20 percenters. You kind of know what that is. You know what they look like. You know how they operate. So you just lift that, and that's a good enough start. That is good enough to start. Okay, now you can get real fancy with this, and I'm not going to do it today because it would burn up too much time and it would be overly detailed. But you can actually score the ICP. You can get a number between 1 and 100. And if it's 70 and above, you go for it. Between 50 and 70, if you've got nothing else, then okay, I'll work it. Below 50, not interested, not doing it. So you can get real fancy with it, but I don't think it's worth it. I just think, well, you know roughly what they look like. I'm really interested in the hiring managers because it's the hiring managers that make a big difference as to how successful and how efficient you are at putting bums on seats. So step one, really, it's not one of the four, but step one has to be you identify what an ideal client looks like. Okay, so the real step one is you have to have the Hot 100. So 100 targets, people, this 100 people, decision makers or hiring managers. Hopefully they're the same thing, but they don't have to be. 100 could be anywhere between 70 and 100 companies. So you might have 2 hiring managers for the same company. It doesn't matter. You've got 100 names of people, and you've always got 100 names. So if you start talking to one of them, you realize they're not going to make a good client, then you take them off, you replace them with somebody else. If you convert one of them into a client, awesome, they become a client. So you put them in your client estate, you replace them with another one. So there's always 100 going on there, right? That's step number one. Now you can outsource that. People do that offshore. You can map that market, or you can do it yourself, or you can get junior members to get a list of names and sit there and go through it all. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't matter. It just has to be roughly right, because when you start to talk to them, you'll figure out whether they're the kind of companies that you want or not. So don't let perfect get in the way of progress on this, right? Just do your best.
So I hear about the Dream 100, the top 100, all that stuff, but I love what you just said, that this list of your 100, you need to actually, like, the second you take it off, what comes off, like, you fill it back up.
Yeah,
it's not like
you
this
do, yeah.
this document that it's 100 and that's it. It's a living 100 that keeps on evolving.
It's in a spreadsheet. I mean, I recommend that people start, if they're doing strategic business development, to start with, because I don't know any of the CRM systems out there that do this, that manage this well. I mean, they kind of do it after a fashion. Just get a spreadsheet. We have a spreadsheet that we give our clients, which has got all the data on it. It's easy. It's easy to manage. It's easy for the manager of the business development function to see what's going on. There's a thing called sales flow, which is the pace, the rate at which these prospects are moved towards being a client. So it's very easy for the managers to see the sales flow. It's just a great management tool. Anyway, so in they go, and you put all the details in that you want. You put their mobile, their cell number, they put their LinkedIn URL. The usual sort of stuff goes in. Great. Okay, so that I think is easy. I don't think that's that hard to do that, really. One of the things that we used to do before the internet existed and before LinkedIn, we just used to go through people's resumes and look to see where they'd worked. And then if we saw a company that we didn't recognize, we would ring up the candidate and talk to them about that company, even if it was 2 or 3 years ago they were there, to try and understand whether they were the kind of company that we wanted, because we didn't have all the modern research functions. There is a million ways that you can assemble your Hot 100. Okay, so shall we put a tick next to that one as being easy?
Yep.
Okay. Next one, not so easy, because you've got to start a conversation on the telephone with somebody who doesn't really want to speak to you. They think that they don't need you. They assume you're going to be something that you're not, because recruitment agencies, particularly in Europe, particularly in the UK, not so much in the States, I think, are not as professional as they could be. And so clients aren't really that interested in talking to them. Plus the fact they're busy. How many agencies can you talk to in a week when you're trying to do your job? So you've got this big challenge. And like I said, if you get through to them, if they don't have a vacancy as far as they're concerned, well, that's the end of the story. Then we can all move on. And it's like, oh, no, that's not what I'm ringing for. That's not the deal here. Right? That's just transactional. That's not what we want. What we want to make sure is the way in which we do things totally matches your tastes, because then we will do great things together. And if it doesn't, then we must, tip our cap and we must go in separate directions. So what we need here are things called conversation starters. And what we want these conversation starters to do is to give us that first telephone call. We don't do cold calls because we don't live in the 1990s anymore, right? We do warm calls now. We do calls, hopefully, with people who are expecting the call. And I'm going to tell you how that works in a second. And so basically what this is going to pan out to is about an average 8-minute telephone pitch. We call it a soft pitch. On the telephone, almost always, you're not going to get a Teams call or a Zoom call on the first one. It's almost certainly going to be a telephone call that you're going to do. And you have, on average, 8 minutes to either convince that person to give you an opportunity at some point now or in the future, or go on to the next stage, which is called a soft pitch. A full pitch, which I'll be talking about it in a minute. Okay, so these conversation starters, as you can imagine, they're quite crucial, because if you don't have something that starts the conversation, the best you can do is cold call. And as I said, not really. I think we can do better than that. So a conversation starter can be, there are three basic ones. The first one, and easily the most important, and the one that's most effective, but not the one that's most voluminous, it doesn't happen that much, is an introduction. If you've got 100 people in a spreadsheet, you can either do it yourself, we outsource ours to India, but somebody can say, who is second connected to this person on LinkedIn? Because if they're second connected, it's possible that we could ring up that second connection and say, how well do you know old so-and-so, the target that we're going for? And if they say, yeah, really well, and you say, would you mind doing an email introduction for me? They'll either say yes or they'll say no. It's fairly straightforward. If they say yes, all you say is, I don't need you to recommend me. I just need you to say that the way in which we work and the way in which they work, there's probably something to talk about. And then CC me into the email. Job done. Conversation started. Right? Well, at least you stand a greater chance. Of course, of those 100, it's very unlikely that you're going to find a lot of them where you've got a second connection prepared to do an introduction, but it's worth a go. So that's always step one, always. Step two is that you can use some of the tactical BD methods. I'm not a big fan of this, but people do it. So does reference flipping translate into American? So you would ring somebody up to take a reference. I've got a candidate who's worked for you, Benjamin, and I'm going to ring you up and say, got this candidate, Fred Bloggs, and I want to just dig in to see whether they're suitable for a role they've got. I do a really good job on the reference, like a really good job. And at the end of it, sometimes the client will say, actually, I'm really interested. We've got a role. Could you tell me a little bit about you? Okay, that's more transactional. But ordinarily what we would say at the end is, look, I don't want to do this now because I think it's inappropriate. Right? The purpose was to ring up and take a reference. But what I would really like to do at some point is to explain our flavour of recruitment, which has been developed. They use the same words every time. You'll hear them cropping up over and over again because we've tested them and they work, right? So we developed this flavour of recruitment over many years of listening to our clients and refining what we do little bit by little bit. And you'll either like it or you won't. Would it be okay at some point to explain that to you? And they'll say yes, they'll say no, but sometimes they say, yeah, do it now then. And you've got your conversation starter. So reference flipping is a good one.
Well,
Sometimes selling a candidate, say again?
Let me just jump in real quick. When it comes to like even a reference check, how many recruiters do a good job at that? It just shows that you're
Dreadful.
completely
That's
different.
awful. Because I tell you, the big thing with me, I was trained to look for a reason not to put somebody forward, not to put a candidate forward. So as soon as I saw something that made me feel uneasy, that candidate was out. I think these days there's more of a desire to put people forward. Yeah, they look okay. Yeah, stick them forward. So when I took references, I was genuinely looking for reasons not to send this candidate forward. That's how we were trained. And so if you do that with a client, they pick that up. They know that. They know you've done a good job. And they're thinking, well, if he's doing this job for his other clients, I'd really like him to do this job for me, which is why very often it switches. We have a client in England. That's their main conversation starter. That's the one that they use the most. And even if they don't have a vacancy or an opening, they'll take a reference on somebody and say, which is true, that they're building a talent pool. So they're building a pool of people who aren't necessarily looking for a job, but they want to make sure that they're good people so that if a job crops up in the future, they've already done the reference check, talent mapping in its truest sense. So if you do a really good job, and if you just do an average job, and if they detect that you're using it to start a conversation, then the chances are it's not really going to work, to be honest. But do a really good job. It is one way. So that's the second way. But what I want to get to the third way, because the third way is my favorite. I don't know whether you've heard of an approach called AIDA. It's actually, if you're pronouncing it, it's like the opera. No, is it opera? No, yeah, opera. AIDA, AIDA. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it because we actually spoke about it on the phone probably about a month or two ago. But prior to that,
Oh,
I actually have
that's
it.
when you would have heard it then. Okay, well let me shortcut this. So it was invented in America, in fact, in 1913. Yes, I said 1913. It's very old, and you use it without knowing it. So everybody uses it; they just don't know. It stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. So if you do a cold call, right, you've got to get their attention real early on. And then if you get their attention, you might get 7 or 8 seconds to get their interest. Okay, so that's the next thing, the I, the interest. If you get their interest, then you get a bit longer to create desire for whatever it is that you want at the end of the telephone call. Give me a vacancy, let me come and see you, whatever it is, right? You can do it in pitches. You can do it when you're asking your boss for a new job. You can use it in a presentation. It's brilliant because you grab attention. Okay, yeah, you got me. Then you get a time to build some interest. Yeah, okay, I'm interested. You go, keep going. Then you get desire when you kind of lay out the thing, and then the call to action at the end. If you've done the other stuff properly, should be easy. It's what's called a passive call to action. So it's nothing particularly big for them. It's just easy to say, yeah, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do that, right? So Ada is magical. It is absolutely magical. I love it. I absolutely adore it. So, and you can use it in so many different ways. If anybody would like to know more about Ada, we have a video on our YouTube channel, which it's a 45-minute video, I think, which explains it in a lot more detail than I've done now. Anyway, what we want is Ada conversation starters. We want pre-designed, pre-tested, pre-built things, number of steps now that we can do that will make it easy, even for an average business developer, to get results. So we're going to develop this centrally, then we're going to let other people use it. It's a tool. All tools simplify, speed up, and standardize, and that's exactly what an AIDA conversation starter does. So I'm going to give you an example of one. And we've got loads of these preset, pre-done, millions of them. I love them. So supposing then we were connected, you and I, but you'd resisted speaking to me, connected on LinkedIn, right? So you'd resisted speaking to me, and I'd sent some emails which you'd ignored. I'd left some messages on your cell, you'd ignored those as well. So now I'll send you an audio message on LinkedIn. I don't know whether that's very popular in the United States, but it's popular here. You send an audio message, right? Yeah, you're familiar with that, right? So for those that aren't, you send it from your phone, your app on the phone. You don't send it from the laptop. It doesn't work. So go on the app and you can send an audio message. And the audio message just basically says, look, I'm sending you this because I've got something which I think would be interesting to you. And I wanted you to realize that this wasn't an AI generated or some kind of code generated message. I'm recording this for you, Benjamin. Right? I'm going to send you an email and I'd like you to look at it. You'll know it's from me because the subject line will be following my LinkedIn voice message. You'll know it's from me because of that. And you'll know in the first 2 sentences whether the rest of that email is relevant. It'll take you about 10 seconds to figure it out. Please take the email and have a look, see what you think, because I think it's going to be relevant, right? So what you've done is created attention and started to build some interest. Obviously, it's like, well, okay, I wonder what that's all about. So it dramatically increases the chance that your email will be opened. So you do that. I'm going to just run the times by you as well. So you'd send that 7 o'clock in the morning. It's less than a minute. It's about 30 seconds, the actual message. Send them all. Send 10 early on, right? And so people are going to listen to that whilst they're having their cup of tea or cup of coffee in the morning. About 11 o'clock in the morning, you then send the email between 10 and 11, right? So the email says, the subject line is, following my LinkedIn voice message. And it says at the beginning, the conditions that apply for this email. So if this applies to you, boom, boom, boom. If you're frustrated with your current recruitment company because they just don't listen, if you're disappointed that you don't get the service levels that you thought, and sometimes if you get a little cross because they just don't listen, then I'd like to share with you our flavor of recruitment. Then you hit them with the top 3 USPs, unique selling points that you have. Now, interestingly, we did some research on this some years ago, but I don't think it's changed since then. The top 3 things that hiring managers want from agencies, excluding a good deal, right? Put that to one side because they all want that. Number 1, they want you to get candidate resumes that other agencies aren't. So they want you to search wider. Number 2, they want these resumes and then people who come for the interview to be absolutely spot on for the vacancy. So you've understood the vacancy and you've properly qualified them to make sure they match. And number 3, you make the process of recruitment easy, convenient and quick. Those 3 things, right? So the closer that you can get your USPs to those 3 things, the better it is. And then at the end, you say, look, I'm going to give you a call just to explain this in more detail. Okay, very short call. If you don't want me to, then please just reply to this email, and of course I won't. Because all the way along, one of the important sub-messages is I'm not desperate. I'm not desperate. If you don't want to work with me, well, that's just peachy, because I don't want to work with you then. Not that you would ever say that, but that's a subtext, right? And then you give them a call and you do the soft pitch. Now, we get some fantastic conversions on that, and there's many different versions of it. Another one is mentioning a competitor in the audio. So we just did a piece of work for XYZ. You know that they're going to know who XYZ is. We recruited a so-and-so and so-and-so for them. And what I'd like to do is send a little email with some of the details in. So keep an eye out for it. It's going to have the competitor name in the subject line. The email comes in, they're going to read it, right? And then you say, of course, well, I'm not going to sacrifice confidences, but this is what we did. This is the approach that we took. What I'd like to do is give you a call to go through this in more detail, right? So there's loads of those. And the data tells us that if you use 6, one after the other, every 2 months, you try a different one, and they're creative and innovative. At the end of it, it's a bit like Charlie Sheen in, what's the one with Michael Douglas, that movie? Come on now. Wall Street. There you go. Right? Charlie Sheen's trying to get to speak to Michael Douglas, can't get to speak to him, just keeps trying different things. And in the end, it's like, who is this guy? Who is this guy that keeps doing these things and will not give up? Yes, okay, what have you got to say? So we have one ADA campaign, which is 7 different interactions, 1 each week, some electronic, some through social media, some through the telephone, and some sending things through the mail. At the end of it, you're almost certainly going to get to speak to them. So you have to assume, if you're not bounded by your lack of creativity, you're going to get an ADA campaign that's going to start a conversation. When you get that soft pitch, you have to be able to articulate why you're different and what your flavor of recruitment is. Because if you can do that, you're much more likely to then go to the next stage, which obviously is a full pitch. So far are we okay? Is that the 2 stages? You've got that. So draw up the list, use the conversation starters that you pre-tested and you know they work a percentage of the time to start a conversation. So far, so good.
And real quick, like how many people are you talking about doing this on a daily basis?
Well, this is the ironic thing about strategic BD. It wins bigger clients, but it takes a fraction of the time. So the first business we had, which was 40 million quid, so about $50 million, I guess, in the 90s. So now 80 or $90 million, I suppose. We had four strategic business developers. That was it. They fed that business because it's very efficient. We always say you need an hour a day to do strategic BD, really. An hour a day on average, because you're not going to every day, are you? But that's what we aim for. So you do these in batches, right? So you would do a batch of, say, 10. And you're going to process all those 100. You're going to try a conversation starter with each of those 100 every 2 months. You can leave it a bit longer if you want. It's just an arbitrary number, right? 2-3 months, right? And then you start again with the next conversation starter. And then you start again with the next conversation starter. So you're just getting through 100 every 3 months, there or thereabouts. But it's so easy. I mean, when we ran the last ones for us in the UK, we don't run them anymore because we get a lot of inbound leads now. But when we ran them, my PA, my personal assistant, who's not a marketer at all, she ran it. She did all the steps. All I did was ring in at the end and make the call, which is relatively simple. To those people that didn't say, don't ring me, which no one said, right? So this isn't a particularly time-consuming thing. It's about creativity. It's about innovation. It's about being distinctive in yourself and being persistent. 100%.
It's almost like slowing down to speed up.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a bit like golf. I just played this morning. You're trying to hit a real big shot. You slow out, it goes nowhere. You slow it down, it goes for bloody miles, right? And it's the same here. Slow it down. Stop kissing frogs, right? Because if you hire a BDer, you push him out the door and say, off you go, go and get me some work. God only knows who they're targeting. In this particular case, you're saying to your business developers, you can still do your tactical stuff. That's absolutely fine. But you need to process these 100 every single month. And every single month, on average, these numbers are average. They do vary wildly. On average, 5% of them you should have a conversation with, on average. So over a year, in theory, you should speak to 60 of them, in theory, right? Can be more than that, can be less than that. But what we're talking about is if we don't give up, I think it was, I want to say Theodore Roosevelt, actually, that had that saying, persistence is omnipotent. Have you seen that quote?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's my absolute favorite quote in the world. Persistent is omnipotent. Everything falls before it. 100%. And that's what we're doing here. I am going to speak to these clients, these prospects. I'm going to speak to them. I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do, but I'm going to speak to them. Charlie Sheen in Wall Street.
Just to clarify for the listeners, if you have BD people, let them keep on doing their tactical stuff. But this top 100, it's over a course of 1 year of doing ADA campaigns. 60, if you talk to 60% of them, that's a successful. The strategic apex
convert
clients.
A good percentage of those if you've got a strong product, because you're selling a solution now. What recruiters mainly do is sell themselves. Hey, look, give me a chance because you're getting me, and I've got all this experience, and I've done all this sort of stuff, and I'm an expert in blah blah blah. Look at my nice suit and everything. I don't know, whatever they do. You're not selling that. You're saying I'm selling a solution. This is what you buy from us. So a less senior person who doesn't have the same chutzpah can still sell it because they're selling a solution. Just like if you were selling vacuum cleaners, you don't need to know about vacuum cleaners. You just need to know the features and benefits of the vacuum cleaner and the effect that has on the people that use them. It's the same deal. You're selling a solution.
Well, and this goes into the question I have on this is it's so often, you're at a firm or you're working for a firm or you own a firm and it's like, go, 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 attack, attack, attack. How do you switch this mentality to do hey, we need to do this strategic, but at the same time, you're I feel like I need to do something.
Really. That's a very good question. I think for starters, you have to have someone who does the strategic BD. So in a small company, it's normally the owner because they're pretty good at BD anyway, right? So they're pretty good at it, right? So they take themselves out of the hurly-burly of tactical BD. Leave that to everyone else, right? You do all that. What I'm going to do is get 100 clients. I'm going to think of these ADA campaigns, or I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to get through all of them over and over and again. And then when I get to speak to them, I'm going to describe what we do, our solution, in such a way that it's compelling. The opposite is it doesn't pass the so what test. It's like, no, that's interesting, but so what, It's the opposite to that. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. So that brings me, this isn't one of the steps, but this is really important. This is a precursor. You have to have a strong product or solution. Now, back in the day, when you productized a recruitment solution, you would have good, better, and best. So you say, well, okay, we've got 3 ways you can deal with this. We've got this, which is good. This is contingent, yada, yada, yada. This is better, and this is like exclusive, and we do this. And we've got best, which is retained, right? So, and you describe it in such a way that they buy exclusive or retained, right? Everyone does that. We've all moved on from that now. That's so passé, right? Because everybody knows about it, and it's a bit cheesy, I think. What we're doing now is what they call a flavor of recruitment. So that means, certainly, I'll tell you the important things. You need to be able to pigeonhole yourself. So who do you trade with most? What do they look for? What kind of people do you provide? And which location or which territory, if you're bounded by territory, do you operate in? So they're the key things everybody wants to know. Next thing is, well, okay, why are you different? And that's really important. And the way in which you find that out, it couldn't be simpler. You just talk to your existing clients and you ask them. You could use anybody, Ben. You could use anybody, right? Why do you use me? What is it that's so special about me and my agency that you continually use us? And they will tell you. If you collect enough of that data, your USPs will pop out. It's like, oh, because of this reason. So that's good enough. But the closer that you can get them to, well, we find candidates that other agencies don't. We qualify them to an extra depth. We're not only looking for people who are suitable, we're looking for people who are serious about the role, right? And then we make the process so easy for you that it's almost a pleasure to deal with us. And then you need proof of what you just said, right? Those are the key areas. You can put other things in there like values and your quality processes and your client care facility, all that sort of stuff, really. But those are the things they really want to know. And then you need to be able to go to the next level of detail. So when they say, well, okay, tell me how you find these people that nobody else finds, you've got to have a credible answer to that, which isn't that difficult, quite frankly. So if you do it in this way, you're drawing them in. It's like, yeah, I really like the sound of this. But here's the thing. When you do this full pitch, when you're explaining the detail of your flavor of recruitment, right, you may be using what they call a two-dimensional pitching deck. You come across one of those, 2D pitching deck. Yeah. So using two-dimensional pitching deck, which means you have a spine of probably 6 or 7 screens, PowerPoint screens, and then you have hyperlinks to different places. So as you're going through, if they're interested in something, you hyperlink, look at a few screens and come back to the one you came from. So you can bespoke every single pitch that you make, but they're standardized because they're using standard screens. It's very cool. But as you're doing this, back in the old days, what people would do is do a pitch, whether they use PowerPoint or whatever. And at the end of it, they say, well, I can prove all of that because, like, here's some case studies or here's some testimonials, or would you like to speak to any of our clients who will vouch for us, right? We don't do that now. What we do now is when we make a claim, like we find candidates that other agencies don't, we prove it. We instantly prove it, either through data, a specific testimonial. So we go over now and here's a testimonial from Alice Springs. And Alice says, well, I use Mike Ames, and the thing I really like about him, he just gets CVs that nobody else gets. I don't know how he does it, but he does it over and over again. So it's a testimonial which proves the things that you've just said. And as you pitch, you bring in these testimonials. So at the end of it, they believe everything that you've just said. There's this kind of mountain of credibility that you've created for yourself. That's a full pitch. That's how a full pitch works, right? So at the end of that, what's going to happen is one of 3 outcomes. Outcome number 1, they're not interested. That's not what we do. No. Fair enough. Okay. So you have to think, will I try them again in the future or not? If so, you can put them in the B list, bring them back in a year or 2 years' time. If not, off to the Russian front. Let them go. And you replace them, obviously, with someone else. Number 2 is they say, yes, that sounds really interesting. We have got some vacancies coming up, or we will put you onto the preferred supplier list, or we need to take this to the next stage, or whatever it is. Great, it's a win. And you know what to do then, obviously. But number 3, and this is the interesting thing that transactional business developers miss off. Number 3 is what we call the forgotten 45%, because on average, it's 45% of the people that you pitch to is, well, it's not a yes, but it's not a no. So you can imagine transactional business developers aren't interested in them because there's no money now. So, but for us, we love them because that's 9 times as many people have said yes are saying, well, it's not a yes, but it's not a no. So what we do is we put them into what's called a 3-tier cultivation regime. Don't think I've got time to talk that through, maybe another time. Actually, we have a video on that as well, weirdly. But you're basically going to cultivate people using the same cultivation techniques pretty much that Joe Girard, I don't know whether you've heard of him, the greatest salesman in the world for 10 years running. He's American. He sold cars for Chrysler, I think. The same technique that he used. He basically keeps in touch and adds value. Right? That's basically what he does in a very structured way over 3 tiers. And what you expect to do is every now and again another one drops in because they're not using you now for one of 2 reasons predominantly. They're not entirely sure about you yet, and they need more proof and more convincing, or the timing just isn't right. They're just not in the headspace isn't right or whatever. So keeping in touch, adding value, going to see people, basically building up rapport and affinity and trust at the same time as waiting until that opportunity comes up. In theory, you should convert about half of the 45%. So of the 100 that you set off with, really you should be trading with 20 to 30% of them, really, within a year to 18 months. That's kind of how the numbers play out. We can imagine the effect that is going to have on your business is enormous, really. It's enormous. So those are the steps. Let me quickly summarize. There's a precursor that you've got your ICP, so you know what a good a 20% looks like for you. There's a precursor that you've put your product, you productized what you offer into a solution. So you've done that. The rest of it's easy. You assemble your Hot 100, you get the conversation started, you test them until they work. Then you basically do them in batches and you apply the different conversation starters over and over again until someone speaks to you. If they don't speak to you now, then you can put them into the forgotten 45% 3-tier conversion regime until they do convert. Ta-da! Easy. There you go.
It's a complex, easy, but it also requires a mentality focus of like
Yes, that's the
slowing
biggest
down.
thing, Benjamin. Yeah, that is the biggest thing. It's the mentality. Most recruiters are trained to get the business. So you say to them, I see it. I watch them sometimes. I do training sessions. So I see them and say, right, okay, let's go through it. So they video it for me. And it's like doing all this. Yeah, well, we're not interested. We're interested in our flavour. And at the end of it, oh, by the way, have you got any vacancies? No. You've just undone all the great work. No. They're programmed. It's programmed into them to do it. So you don't need too many strategic business developers in an organization because it's an hour or maybe an hour or two a day. That's all it is. So they can have another job. They can be an account manager perhaps, or they can be a team leader perhaps. If you've gone down the pod system, they would be the pod leader that did it. And they can still do tactical BD if you like. But what you notice is as time goes on, so at the end of both of my businesses, particularly the first one, which I was involved with more, the more strategic BD that you do, the less tactical BD that you need to do. So at the end, I don't think we were doing any at all, really. We won the big clients, and then we looked after the clients. We used client care to make sure they got the vacancies, and we were first choice. It's only complex, really, Benjamin, in the sense that there are a lot of moving parts, but none of the moving parts are difficult. None of them. There isn't a single thing that I've said to you today which is difficult when you get down to the level of detail that we need to make this work. It's not difficult to do. Put it all together is kind of difficult, I accept that, but once you understand it and break it down, what do they say? How do you eat an elephant? A mouthful at a time. It's the same thing. It's not difficult, really.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I took a ton of notes already during this interview personally. Well, we're going to jump over to the quickfire questions.
Okay.
And because this is awesome. And I feel like just like every time we always talk, Mike, like time just flies.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
What advice would you give to a brand new recruiter that's just starting out to become successful?
Focus. Focus your time, focus your attention. Eventually get to the stage where you've got a niche and then a micro niche, because that's the thing that will get you around supplier lists. You'll make more money. You'll charge bigger rates for what you do, bigger fees for what you do. And after a while, you'll attract people because you're known as the go-to guy or the go-to girl for something. Focus.
And same question, but for experienced recruiters, what advice would you give to them to be
Learn
successful?
to write authentic content. That I'm not a huge AI kind of fan, really, although I am and I'm not. But when it comes to content, I'm very definitely not. It's just anodized. It's horrible, really. Learn to write. Learn to be able to put your voice into words and post regularly. Build your personality, add value, publish things that are interesting, interact. That's the way that you set yourself apart online these days, and you kind of have to do that. Definitely.
Like, so when AI first came out, like I was actually using a lot more AI posts and stuff like that. But now everybody can just see that's written by AI.
Oh yeah, and emails. Really, are you going to send me that? Okay then.
I feel like the word game changer has been like overused.
Well, I've been in IT computing since 1978. I took a degree in computer science. So what happens is always the same. A new product comes along and everybody says, this is going to change everything. This is going to change everything. Then everyone becomes terribly disappointed that it's nowhere near. And by the time the technology has caught up and overtaken people's expectations, it's too late. Only a few people are interested in it. And that's going to happen with AI for sure.
So what advice would you give to recruitment firm owners that are looking to attract and keep their own talent?
Well, that starts with an EVP, an employee value proposition, which I don't think is a big thing in America as it is in Europe. Essentially, the research tells us that 75% of candidates, particularly Gen Zs and millennials, are as interested or even more interested in the company that they're going to join as they are the job. So it's very important to represent the important things that they look for in companies in a way that they can understand and assimilate. And it's called an EVP, an employee value proposition. So if you want to attract people for yourself, then you must write your own EVP. So, and you sell that first. Before we sell the job, we sell the company. Come and join me. Who was it? It was Steve Jobs. Oh, crikey, I can't think of the guy's name now. He was the CEO of Pepsi, and Steve Jobs was trying to get him to work for Apple. And he basically said to him, look, are you going to make sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come and join me and change the world? Right? He didn't talk about the job. He talked about the mission, right? The values, what we're trying to do here. And it's kind of that first. And then when you get them hooked, then you can talk about the job. And then all you need to do is deliver what you promise, and people will stay. Our attrition rates are about less than 3% every year on annual attrition rates of staff. And that's because we've got a really strong mission and a really strong culture. We listen to them, we treat them well, and we deliver what we promise. Who would want to leave that kind of business? Who would want to leave that?
Well, I mean, I feel like recruiting, like people jump into recruiting and jump out of it so quick.
They do, they do, I think that's why it's important to try and hire people who see recruitment as a profession, as a way forward, and want to do it properly. Steve Martin said once when he was asked, how do you get on in show business? He said, you've got to be so good they can't ignore you. And that's the secret to success in recruitment, really. You've got to be so good they can't ignore you. You're really so obsessed with quality and service levels and improvement in the way in which you find people and qualify them. So good they can't ignore you. If you do that, forget all the marketing schmizzle. If you can do that, you will be successful.
Love that. Has there been a book that's had a huge impact on your career?
I read all the time. There's lots of them. I'll tell you the one I'm reading at the moment. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. Don't know whether you've come across that one. Looks like you have. It's brilliant. I love it. Just love it, really. And it's about focus, really, strangely enough, and about concentration. So I suppose that works. But that's a really good book. If you feel overwhelmed and you feel you don't have enough time to do everything, get that book and see what it tells you.
That book kind of woke me up on the idea of how busy I was versus productive.
Busy doesn't necessarily mean productive, does it, apparently? So
not at all.
No, I think it's a really good idea to go through that, yeah.
What's been, like, you've sold 2 businesses. Like, what's been a huge driver of your own personal success?
Well, I like to be busy. I like to have a struggle. I like to have something that's a challenge in my life, something that's not easy. I like something that if it fails, it's going to hurt me in some way. I like to be on a journey. I like to have come from somewhere, be somewhere and going somewhere and can see the journey. I love to work with people who are passionate and committed and want to do great work. They want to do great work. They're not satisfied with average. They want to do great work. I love that. And I'll love it until the day I die. It's awesome.
And like, this is my favorite question. And I know I probably asked this on episode 80, but I want to hear your answer again. Like, you've sold 2 businesses, you've grown 2 businesses, you've dealt with a lot of heartache with all that. There is a ton of up and downs when you are a firm owner. If you got a chance to go back and sit down with yourself early in your career, with everything that you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, spend more quality time with your family. Oh, if I knew Doctor Who and I could get in his time machine and go back, that's the thing I would tell myself. Look, you idiot, you don't need to sacrifice everything to be successful. Don't do that. Don't do that thing when you go on vacation and sneak off to do your emails or look at your phone when you're at dinner to do something. No. When you're with them, you're with them. 100% with them. Leave your phone at home. Don't turn your computer on. They know this. Give them the time that they want, because believe you me, that time passes so quickly and then they're gone. They don't need you anymore. So 100% that would be. I said that the last time as well.
And I'm just now thinking about like going out to dinner with my wife later. I'm like, you know what? I just need to leave my phone at home.
Yeah, well, I've got a second phone, which is just an old-fashioned flip phone. It's about 50 quid or something it cost me. And all it does is make phone calls and sends SMS text messages. That's all it does. And I'll take that. So if anybody needs me, they can get me, but I can't do anything else on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, how can they follow you?
Well, we run a show every 2 weeks called the Mike Ames Recruitment Show. You can find that just through LinkedIn, because it's live streamed through LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where they all go. We have a podcast where the audio go if you're a podcast person. Or you could just connect with me on LinkedIn. We also produce one-off webinars. So we've got the next webinar. I don't know when this goes out, so it's hard to say, but we're producing a webinar which is an hour a quarter on the detailed breakdown of strategic BD. We do things like that, so we do a lot of content, free content for people. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll see it in my posts.
Awesome. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
I think I tell you, just one thing. Years ago, I hired a coach. Her name was Anne Marie, and I was in trouble because it had just after I had the breakdown, and I needed someone to help me. And one of the things that she taught me to do was I was a recruiter, but I was running a $6 or $7 million business. But my mentality was still a recruiter, and I was running this business. And what she taught me was to take on or absorb a business owner's mentality, which is at the opposite end to a recruiter. Whereas recruiters, everything's immediate, make money immediately, everything's got to turn into a deal. A business owner isn't like that. A business owner will invest for the long term. They plan for the long term. They're prepared to do things without an immediate return to it. And she helped me to switch from being a recruiter that owned a business to be a business owner that ran a recruitment firm. There is a world of difference. And I would urge everybody to look at yourselves and think, which are you? Because to be successful and to have a good life, you need to be a business owner who runs a recruitment firm.
Mike, thank you so much for once again coming on. One of the challenges with bringing you on, Mike, and every time we talk is like time just magically flies.
I know. This isn't it? Yeah.
I look down and I'm like, I got a few more questions I want to ask, but I'm like, wow, the time just flew.
I'll come back next year. And do another one. We'll be fine. But I
Awesome.
love it. You're very good. I did say this on the post. You are a very good interviewer. You know how to get the best out of people. You're a very good listener. And I love coming on this show. I was so looking forward to today, I have to say. So thank you for having me on. And I hope all the people listening to this have got something from it.
Awesome. Well, I absolutely believe that they did. Like, slow down to speed up. I hope you took a ton of notes. And for the listeners, I want 2024 to be your best year yet. Let's crush it.
So do I.